chapters and all those tutorials which I've sent on neural. So is that okay if I don't post these handouts and only the reading material?
Sir, could you put both? Because I think some of them prefer slides, but like I would personally prefer the reading material. So is it okay if you could put
Okay.
both?
Okay. No issue from my side, either
Yeah.
way. Okay, fine. So we'll go ahead with this and we'll see. So first of all, this when we start with this, as I told, many of you are already familiar with these concepts. So forget them for some time and try to take it in a fresh view. So we'll see this. So when we talk about this neural nets and all these things, so basically we talk about this human brain. So we are talking about, as I told you earlier also in the very first class, that though we claim that those neural nets mimics or emulates the behavior of human brain neuron, but to be very honest with you, it's very far away from that. You can say asymptotically this emulate, but not exactly. But even with that rough approximate emulation of the human brain and human neurons, we are able to do so much. So we'll try to contextualize all these things in this class. And let's see that what these neurons are, what models are, and some biological aspect. To be very honest with you, I'm very poor in biology, but somehow I'll go through this as a part of ritual, you can see. But I'll not ask anything in exam, somehow that. So human brain, basically it computes in a completely different way from conventional computer. When I say this, what I literally mean to say that. So human brain is good at something, but not all. Can you tell me what it is not good at? Any one of you? Any rough guess what is not good at? When I say good at, means very prompt and quick.
So making fast calculations.
Yes. And what is good at?
So perception of things, visual perception.
Yes, perfect. 100%. So human brain is perfect. It's so good in vision and visual thing recognition. Let's say you met your friend after maybe 20 years down the line, and probably he left. He was there only, or she was there only in schooling with you in nursery or maybe LKG. And somewhere during masters you met, and not through a formal, you just saw him or her, and reluctantly you say, this guy is that, or girl is that, ये वही लड़की है लड़का है क्या जिसकी नाक बहती रहती थी हमेशा, and all this. And of course you won't see this clearly to him or her, but you say, तू वही है क्या गुरमीत कौर? Yeah, just something like, just guess it. And the other person, very likely that you are almost 99% correct. You are able to recognize. So currently in the entire world, irrespective of the so much advancement, what we claim in computing and all this neural, etc., there is no system that can do this. Just one show of your image, so predated as old as 20 years. And after till between 20 years, there was no exposition to that particular image. And all of a sudden, if you saw that and the person predicts is almost correct. So this is the power of human brain. So human brain is exceptionally good in this visual perception and recognition, where machines are still not that good. It takes time for them, but you are able to quickly do it. You don't need any training as such of that, right? So this is something we are blessed with. We take it for granted, but we are so powerful. At the same time, when I say this, so as somebody told it, that it is not good at calculations, and definitely you are 100% correct. So if I say 5692 in 2024, etc., and immediately you won't be able to, but where machine is very good at, as simple program like LC algo is much faster, right? So we'll see this, some of this, and there are some problem or lacunae with the human brain, but in spite of that, it is so fast and efficient, and we'll try to understand the reason behind it, and we'll see that. So basically, a brain is highly complex, non-linear and parallel system. So parallel system, we'll see how and why is it so. So, and the organization of neurons to perform tasks much faster than computers. And what's the reason behind it? So let me tell you the basic building block of your brain is a concept, what they call is a neuron, right? Key feature of the biological brain is the basically experience. Experience shapes the wiring through plasticity. When I say plasticity, what literally mean to say that? And here when I say experience means you have gone through this particular process. So good or bad experience, still it's something made you to learn. Let's say a very simple example. I'll tell you that, um, and you all are familiar with the MIT campus. So I'm just trying to correlate so that we a common scenario we all can correlate ourselves. You know that there's a Nagabana road, what we call as the MS Vishwasharya road, which is just runs outside the MIT through that this Naga temple, right? That road you remember. Let's say that once upon a time, once you are traveling or late you came, or probably around 8 or 9 at night, and you're walking, maybe alone, and you found that some miscreants came and snatched your mobile phones. And it has not happened before that time, even though you stayed for 3 4 years, but it never happened. So this particular experience will makes, and immediately your things get a plastic or your neural connections will form, or this information get embedded or stored in some part of memory. And then you say, yes, after 8 o'clock, it is not safe to pass through this Nagabana road. So this kind of experience is basically, and it's basically it's wired some sort of connection in between in your brain, and you learn it. Okay, I should not venture alone after this time. So this experience is there, and basically it shapes the wiring through plasticity. When I say plasticity, means you keep changing or molding like that, and hence learning becomes a central issue in the neural network. Means some sort of learning. So basically, it is always experience-based learning. So we'll see some other context as well. So formally, if I want to put it across this, so I can say that a neural network is a massively parallel distributed processor made up of simple processing unit, and which has a natural propensity for storing experimental. Instead of saying experimental, I should have written here experiential knowledge. Basically, it's a typo, experiential knowledge, and making it available for use. So basically, say that is a massively parallel and distributed process, simple processing unit as what we call a neurons. And it says which is a natural propensity for storing experiential knowledge and making it available for use. So the example which I quoted, that you are passing through Nagabana road, right? And this information, basically you have stored it. Experientially you came across this, something happened, and it says making it available for use. So next time, if you are alone and the same time it is happening after 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock and you're alone, you will think once, even though you don't intentionally go for this, but with that experience will come reflexively. Last time it happened with me, somebody snatched my mobile phone, and this is the time now and I should not go. So this is what that experiential knowledge is coming for use now. So you can save yourself and take a normal main gate via MIT and pass through in the safe passes, right? So that's what we call as a neural network resembles a brain. So many aspects. Knowledge is acquired from the environment through a learning process. So when I say environment, I'm not talking about this ecological environment. What I'm trying to say that environment in which your system is supposed to work. The environment I quoted is your Nagabana road or the MIT system, like whatever it may be. So this is what I'm trying to say. And knowledge is acquired from this environment through learning process. Means something has happened and you learn from this. Regarding this learning process, we'll talk about later, but for the timing, you all understand what it means. Right? At any point of time, if you feel that whatever I'm talking is all just illogical, please stop me. Please stop me. Or if you have any query, just don't hesitate to ask, stop me there itself. We'll clarify. So here there is something called inner neuron connection strength. Basically, this how strongly you remember something or how deeply something ingrained in your brain is basically there is a unit what is called which equals what we call as a synaptic weight, that will basically signify, or I should say, quantify the strength of the connection, or basically you can say that how strongly you remember, something of that sort, you can say that. And are used to store the acquired knowledge, you can say, whatever the knowledge may be, good or bad. When I say knowledge, knowledge is knowledge only. And so the procedure used for learning is whatever the procedure we follow or use it is something called learning algorithm, right? So weights or even the topology can be adjusted. So learning algorithm will be there. When I say topology, what I mean to say the neural network structure. So hold on for some time. I'll talk about all this weights, topology. This all concept sounds a bit different, but some majority of you are aware, but I want to tell from the first principle itself. So let's say a very simple example will I talk about this learning algorithm, and I'll take you back to your probably say nursery classes, or like I say LKG, when you started writing something, right? So I'm going to talk about quote a particular scenario, what is called learning with a teacher, which in a formal aspect in machine learning and neural nets, what we call as a supervised learning. So when I say this learning with a teacher, so you went there and your teacher and drawn something. So you are not able to draw, let's say A for apple. And this, remember that four line copy notebook where all red, green, blue kind of thing is there for English language when we learn. And we are supposed to draw this A. So what you did this, you put it and drawn this A over the entire page. Then madam says, no, no, beta, we should not do something like this. So probably she holded your hand and drawn within the limits of this four line. So next time you are supposed to do. And so when I say this, so that kid, you as a kid is basically a model, right? And teacher is something like a reference thing, reference material using which you're comparing. She is comparing that A is not supposed to be written over the entire page. So the correct value is within that limit of 4 lines. And based on this is an error is given to you, known to you know, this is not supposed to be done. So error is fed back to the system. So as you, it was given to you, no, but you should not write like this, only within these 4 lines. So, and maybe you are not able to do in one iteration or one go. So multiple iterations is required, and probably in few days of time, you are able to draw, or not draw, I should say, write A within these 4 lines properly, right? And when it happens, then the teacher dislodge herself from that particular teaching anymore and move to another alphabet, let's say. So this is what is called supervised learning, and the concept which I talk about means a error is known to when you're getting back what is called basically as something called back propagation or error propagation, you can say that, or error feedback mechanism system. So we'll see all those details and mathematical aspect of it later. But this I give a very crude way of learning which we come across in our life. Not only that, every now and then if you want to learn a skill, so there is somebody to monitor you, to correct you. Let's say you went to marina and started exercising. Somebody is going to tell you that how you lift a dumbbell, how should you use this particular machine, what is the right way. Simply you don't do in a whatever the haphazard or the way you want. There is a way to do the right or wrong way, right? Somebody will be, some coach will be there or some trainer will be there to always guide you. So that is also basically learning by learning with a teacher kind of. So that is also supervised learning. So we'll see that. Now some of the, do you know how I get rid of this line? It's quite irritating. Anyone? Any idea? Sometime it will be there, sometime not. I don't know how. Okay, good. So here we have some benefits, if I say, or benefits, or I should say features of this. So there is something on no linearity. So no linearity, as you know, that what is happening and why it has to be no linear, this the proper reasoning I'll talk about later. So the basic component neurons are basically, they follow a particular function which is non-linear in nature, right? And that particular non-linearity is distributed throughout. And more discussion on this, why it should not be linear, we'll see later. And there is then something called input-output mapping. So when I say input-output mapping, what I'm trying to say here is Here there is something what we call in supervised learning setting, what we call as a something called input output map, or say, just a minute, let me go to the board. And so when I here, so we'll be using a very frequent terminology which we use in neural network machine learning, whatever, that is something called example. When I say example, please note that I'm not referring to the example in general sense, like we say in our day-to-day conversation. For example, like this. No. Here, when we say learning scenario, what I'm trying to say example is that the Nagabana situation I'm talking about, like let's say scenario I'm talking about, walking through Nagabana Road. Please mind my beautiful writing. So let's say in this particular scenario, and once it has happened, yeah, and you concluded that it is not safe, right? So right or wrong, that we'll see. But based on this, basically, when a machine works, it works on statistics. But out of this many times, how many times it really happened, right? So let's say scenario one, or I'm saying example one, and let's say there are many aspects on which it depends. So let's say this one, there's a term x1, x2, and x3. And finally, you can see this outcome was there, your y value, whether uh, you experience theft or you are safe. Let's say that safe means you retained your mobile phone, theft means somebody has taken, right? So either two things can happen. So this is, I'm saying why. So the example scenario which I'm saying that the example one, or you can say scenario one, whatever it may be, and here I'm saying x1, x2, x3, and this is my outcome. Let's see. So example one, it might be some values here, whatever may be. So it may be 0, 1, or let's say whatever, it depends on what kind of feature you're talking about. And it has happened that you are safe. Another time instant, what happened that this some values are there and you are again safe. And sometime else likewise, and you lost. Another one, something may be safe. Why? So this entire matrix which you are going to get it into or map into, let's say if I'm saying this, so basically I can map it as a basically uh, m cross 4, where m is the number of total examples, like this, let's say this m, isn't it? So it's going to be a matrix of this form. So this here, what I mean to say, example, or you can see is a scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, but this will be wrong if I say scenario. Scenario is basically this one. So the instance 1, instance 2, instance 3 or 4, etc. So this is what we call an example here. Okay. So when I say this, so you want to find, ultimately this is the training example. If you supervised learning setting, this will be the data given to you. And at the end of the day, what happens? Suppose based on this, your machine is there and you have trained it, and on the another, say m plus 1 day or some arbitrary day you're coming, and with this value, if you put it and you want to predict whether I'll be safe today or my phone will be taken, let's say, right? So this is what you want. So if this kind of system is there, so ultimately what you are looking for is something like this. You want a particular system, which is, what is this F? You don't know, right? And this is your input basically, and this is your output, right? So you can say that F is nothing but is a map of basically in this particular context if I talk about. So you can say that it's basically map of m cross 4 to like this, right? So ultimately you want when I give this input, so literally it should be 3, only the input attribute if I put it across, and the final outcome should be I'll be getting whether I'll be safe or unsafe, right? So this kind of data when is available, where this is what is called input part and this is output part, this is what is called input-output mapping. So your neural networks are basically universal approximator. Whatever the data you get, somehow they will try to approximate this function, which is explicitly not known to you. This is what I literally mean to say. Okay. So this was about input-output mapping in supervised learning setting. And there is adaptivity. So either retain or adapt can deal with non-stationary environment. So what I mean to say that, suppose you have designed some scenario for this Nagabana road, and if you try to put another scenario from another road, so after a few training or those features setting and changing, your model is fit to go. It will adapt itself without any problem. So only thing is, suppose in one particular scenario you have trained something and another scenario, whether it will adapt or not, it will. So you might have learned or might have heard of something what is called transfer learning. So transfer learning effectively does that. People have trained something in a different environment and try to use it, learn it in some another environment with a little bit training or zero training, and it works. So some of that sort you can say at adaptivity. And then there is something called evidential response. So here when I see evidential response, and nowadays people are talking about this more and more. When I say that evidential response means if you're deciding something, what is the confidence measure you are talking about? With what confidence my model is saying that today you'll be you'll be losing your phone. Let's say if you walk through this scenario and under this time, let's say it's a dark so and so time is there, you are alone. Let's say these are the three features, right? Okay, you are at this one dark, time is 9 o'clock, and you are alone. And you want to, your system has predicted in your, let's say this kind of system you have developed, put it in a mobile phone, and you want to say that under this scenario today, what are the chances that I'll be getting this? Whether my phone is will be safe with me or somebody will take it away. And so this is, and first of all, please note that's a disclaimer statement that this example I'm talking about, it looks very ridiculous, but I'm trying to put it a very simple scenario so that you can correlate and try to understand this concept. The legitimity or accurateness of this example is right or wrong, that we'll see later, just to try to understand this concept, that's all. So here, when you want to say that, with what evidence you are saying this, that it is going to be lost or somebody will snatch from you. So with what confidence? So this is some sort of evidential measure you are talking about, evidential response you're talking about. So nowadays, this is very much talk of the town, and there's another area altogether, what is called XAI, what is called explainable AI. Means if this is the you are predicting, why should I believe it? Means can you explain this? So here, if a lighter version of this means you can say that if you are predicting something of this one, with what percentage of confidence you are talking about this. So we'll see this later. And then there is something called contextual information. So every neuron in the network potentially influence every other neuron. So contextual information is dealt with naturally. So what I mean to say that you cannot talk about neural in a very localized fashion. Means something you are getting input, it is affecting all in one local setting and not affecting other. No, it affects the overall. So it is a very contextual. Then fault tolerance. So when I see fault tolerance, so neural network is basically, if you remember that I said, is a massively parallel and distributed structure. So you might have come across. So let's talk about the human brain, how it basically takes care of this fault tolerance. Many of time in your life so far, you might have banged your head with somebody else or a wall or something. For some time, you just hold your head and set down. Maybe something depending on the kind of impact. For some time, you find that you are not able to see anything. आंखों के सामने अंधेरा हो गया kind of stuff, right? Many a time it happens, right? So that time effectively that neuronal structure get impacted, and some people, especially in this vehicle accidents or that kind of injuries too much to the brain and some part of it, people lost it completely, the vision or something else part of it, or sometimes memory itself. In the movies are beautiful, for example, for that, and to recover back, they strike it again once again of similar trauma or similar scenario to create that. So that right or wrong, that's a different story altogether. But what I'm trying to say that many times we bang it, but it does not mean that your system comes down abruptly. No, if it goes through means it may be for momentary or somebody is there to take over the role. And why it is happening so? Because the structure is massively parallel and one part goes down doesn't affect the entire system altogether. Something else is up there to take care of that particular role. So when people design this, emulate this kind of behavior in the real life, that also happen in one neuron stop functioning does not mean that your system, your models completely say, no, I'm malfunctioning. No, that's why I say that it's basically its performance degrades gracefully. So all of suddenly it doesn't go and performance degradation will happen, but gracefully, slowly it will impact. And if you take this corrective measure on time, definitely it will fit to go. So this is what I mean to say. And one of the reason which I told you, it's basically massively parallel and distributed structure. This is the reason why it behaves in that way. And then this VLSI, so the VLSI, I should say UVLSI, ultra very large scale implementation, because of this massive and parallel structure, this VLSI technology is very suitable for that. So people are able to design chip for doing something of that sort. So all these neural components people are able to design. Then uniformity of analysis and design. So what I mean to say about this means this terms and terminology and concept in neural nets are that they are universal in nature. Universal in nature means if this part of the world we are calling something as a synapse, so other part of the world is also this concept, synapse. So whatever the understanding of synapse we have here, it will be there also. So the common component, shareability of theories and learning algorithm, and seamless integration based on modularity, something of that sort. Effectively, this applies to any field, but basically in case of neural, these components are there. You can universally they are available and people can make it and make use of it. Learning algorithms are there. Whatever the understanding of this learning algorithm, say A in part of Asia or somewhere else, it remains same. This is what they mean to say uniformity of analysis and design. Then there is something called neurobiological analogy. So what this neurobiological analogy is that basically neural nets, you know that it is motivated by the neurobiology, and engineers turn to neural networks for insights and tools. Just to, or you can say, I should say this, engineers turns to neural networks. When I say networks, so human or the biological system to understand this, how this happens in the human brain. Is it possible for me to emulate this through the simulation and try to make use of it? This is the engineer's perspective. Now, what does the biologist turn into that? Because it is not possible for a biologist or a doctors to open anybody brains and play with some neuron, cut here, cut there, and see what happens. So they try to go for this mathematical model of this neural networks, which emulates certain part of it. To say that if I chop this neuron here, or if you bring it down here, what will happen? What impact it make? And based on that study, they try to understand and learn based on this observation and try to incorporate some of those learning from their normal treatment, surgery, or whatever it may be. So that's why it's basically a complementary work for each other. Like humans learn the biology to emulate this through mathematical modeling, and doctors make use of this model to study this, the biological model itself, this how it can be impacted or what changes can be made. So these are the few, I should say, benefits of neural networks, or you can say some of the basic characteristics of this. Okay. Now let's say this, and I'll move to the, so before this, anyone of you have any query here so far? Hello? Does anyone of you have any query? Are you there? Okay, I suppose there is no. And I just want to do experiment. Just anyone of you raise hand. I want to know in the full screen if somebody raise hands, do I come to know or not? Please raise hand, at least one of you, just experimental basis. I want to know. Do I get any signal here? Has anybody done this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, so I'm not getting any signal. Okay. Okay. Unraise your hands. I just wanted to know that if something is there, we can raise hand and do something in full screen mode as well. Okay, fine. So it is not coming. So I assume that so far there is no query because these are the preliminary things and this concept just to idea about it. Now let's move to the human brain. So this part is I'm slowly venturing into this little biological aspect of it, where I'm a bit poor. I should say very poor. Anyway, so this basically human brain, they have classically segmented into three blocks. You can see that three blocks. One is receptor, and in between this brain, human brain, which they have represented by a neural net, and the effectors. So basically, all these black arrows are responding basically some sort of stimulus in the signal, forward signal, and that backwards are basically some sort of feedback signal. Okay. So when I say stimulus, so stimulus means something through skin or hand, etc. You came to know. Let's say there is a mosquito is bite is there. So some stimulus you get a prick, and your skin senses and all those things or muscle, etc. They receive this, immediately convert into the electrical signal, and those electrical signals are processed by your brain, that is represented by neural nets here, and accordingly it will be passed on to effectors. So effectors are your body, and finally those basically chemical or this electrical signal get converted into the actual responses, and you go and hit it, and finally your hand is red. Oh man, you have killed one mosquito. So this all things, it happens in a quadratic loop, not directly in this way. So this is a very simplified version. So for this analysis, or you can say that for this kind of understanding how it really happens, we should be thankful to Santiago Ramon, the Valcárcel, basically a Spanish anatomist who introduced neurons as a fundamental unit of brain function. And I want to tell you something about this Kajal, that he was a very poor student in his MBBS in that time. Very poor. He, with a great difficulty, somehow he passed. But instead of treatment and all these things, he was so good in those things, and he studied this brain so closely. And he was the first to draw the structure, neural structure means he was the first to peep into so deeply into human brain and draw the neural structure. And the graph is devoted to him initially, and he named them, etc., as the neurons, etc. And you know that he was given this Nobel for that. So for this kind of deep understanding or neuroanatomy, which he studied that. So whatever the understanding we have, basic one, we thank the Kajal for that. So now let's see that, and this and all the, as I told you that in many aspects the human neurons are very poor in performance. So an example, neurons are slower than silicon logic gates. When I say this electrical component equivalent of that. So let's say for per operation, it take basically one 10 to minus 3 per operation as compared to, so you can say it's milli, it takes millisecond per operation, let's say, whereas this silicon thing is in nano. So definitely this silicon part is very much faster, much faster. But in spite of that, can any one of you tell me what could be the reason that even the humans, this one, your human neurons are so slow, but and your equivalent today's computers maybe is not only says -9, maybe 12. It is talking about this in Pico also. They're so fast, but still a simple vision problem if I give, you are able to do much faster as compared to the machine. Can you tell me what could be the reason? Any guess?
Complexity of the neural net.
Hello? Yeah.
Complexity of the brain is much more than the machine.
Yes, because the here, as I told, basically it's a huge network. It's like basically a massively parallel and distributed system. Very large number. Number is humongous. So which I'll show you soon. Also, so this I mentioned this. So the reason behind is you'll be surprised that you have almost or roughly 10 raised to power 10 neurons and this many connections in human brain. Oh my God, humongous. And you can imagine that this with kind of this numbers, No one can emulate, or you can say that design such a systems on the earth, and that is human brain is able to do that. And this is one of the reasons. Also, you'll be surprised that it is very highly energy efficient. When I say highly energy efficient, so see here, it is 10 to minus 16 joule per operation per second it takes. As compared to that, even to the best of this one, whatever they might have achieved, probably they might have gone to 9, but never near to this kind of this such a small energy. You know that your systems are working, and if you are putting your some deep learning experiment you put across, it's really heat up like anything, and it emulates that this one emits so much of heat. But you do a lot of operation, you see somebody's and all these things, your mind does not get blow up by heat. Is so energy efficient systems are there, is working, so it is very energy efficient. So this is some basic statistics, or I would say statistics, the basic values which distinguish a human brain to a the hardware equivalent of that. Now neurons and synapse, so this is they are so I want to tell you that the structure of the neuron in the various part of our brain are not same, they are different. So this which I'm talking about here is one particular structure, and you cannot say this is universal. Universal means all the part of brain you're having same kind of, but they have similar structure like this. So here you have this kind of this one, if you take a small and just open it up, so you get this kind of connections will be there. And these are something called dendritic spines. Dendritic spines because of this particular nature. And this spines means here your skin part, you can say, or whatever, it from which it takes the input from outside, right? And here is a cell body, what the wall is a vessel, right? And the connection from one neuron to the another neuron is through a particular this one line, what is called a axon. So axon is basically a thin long wire, you can see that it connects one neuron to the another neuron. Okay, and then we have synaptic terminals, and through this terminals another neuron get connected. So there is something called, so I was talking about synaptic weights. So the synapse etc is basically a neurobiological concept, it's not completely technical. So from that it has been taken. So we'll try to see the analogy and how a mathematical equivalent of this has been formed. So we'll see that. Now, this is something which I just got it from this regarding this, how this working of synapse happens. So somebody who's interested in the biological aspect of it. So before this, there are two terms to be taken here. Somebody's mic is on, please off it. Okay. So there are something what is called presynaptic and postsynaptic, and that is synaptic. So here we presynaptic is whatever input you're getting to this synaptic part, and then what you call a presynaptic, and whatever output you're drawing from the synapse, what is called postsynaptic. Now, so here there is this entire chemistry or mechanism is mentioned here. You have something called action potential arrive at axon terminal. When I say action potential, so this action potential is nothing but some sort of signal, electrical signal basically, and this action potential, it get converted into some chemical thing. So here, if you say that is voltage gated, this one CA2 channels opens. So this action potential came, some sort of electrical signals is causing some sort of chemical reaction, then this gates get opened. When this gate gets opened, at this particular point, CA2 enters this ions, enters the cell, and it's basically it signals the vesicles. So if you ask me what is this vesicle, so I never bother to go and do all this thing because we don't need that, but just for sake of completeness I'm telling this. So this vesicles, now this at this particular position fifth, when I say this vesicles move to the membrane where this synaptic cleft is there, and basically it docked vesicles release neurotransmitter by exocytosis, whatever they call it. And using this particular process, once they have, it releases something and they try to dock it now. Neurotransmitter diffuses across the synaptic cleft and binds to receptor. These are the receptors. When I say binding, so this binding may be loose or maybe tight. When I say tight, what I'm trying to say that tight means the value we try to equivalently say in mathematics is the value is high, synaptic weight value, which we represent as as a by weight parameter, means how closely or how strongly this is binded. If it is loosely binded, you give less value. If it is tightly binded, it is giving more value, right? Now, in case of mathematical aspect of this, when I say synaptic weight value, so it can be positive or negative also. But in case of real sense, how happens in brain, there is no concept of negative as such. But in our mathematical aspect model, we take it for positive or negative. So this is just a biochemistry regarding the synaptic weight and all those things. Now, some terminology which I mentioned here. So synapse where two neurons meet, which I told you in the before dendritic cell and all these things. And then this presynaptic neuron means what is the source, which is the source neuron. And you can see postsynaptic neuron is what is the target neuron, where it is connecting to. Neurotransmitters, molecules that cross the synapse. And dendrites, basically branch that receives input. Okay. And axon, which I mentioned, is just like a transmission line. So it's a branch that sent output, basically spikes or action potential, traverses the axon and triggers neurotransmitter release at axon terminals. So basically some sort of, you can say there's some sort of impulses it has, electrical impulses. And these are the entire structure, right from the molecule to synapse and neural microcircuit. So what is happened, this chemical things happens, then synapses formation happens. And many synapses and all, they form a something circuits, what is called neural microcircuits. When you say neural microcircuits means there are multiple neurons all together, they form a circuits to meet a particular objective. Now, let's say that in our neural, the different circuits are there. Some are meant for our vision, some are meant for our hearing, some are meant for our motor control, etc. So like that. And finally, so all this neuron, and based on the neuron, they have these local circuits. When I say local circuits means, local circuit means the entire circuitry of neurons, which is meant for a particular brain functioning, as I said, vision, neuron, etc. Then they have interregional, and finally your entire brain, you can say central nervous system. So this is all this the theory or the statement about those things. So you can go through it when you want. Now let me so this is basically what they call the cyto-architectural map of the cerebral cortex. So they have meticulously identified which part is happening what. So all this part and this basically is a lateral surface, and this medial is basically cut in between, and see how it looks like. And this different aspect they have enumerated. This is not important for us, means which way this is more for the a neurobiologist people too, but just to have an idea, because there are so many reasons across it. That's what say this neuronal region, and different circuitries are meant for that. So again, I visit to that one. So this basically this kind of entire cell is the what kind of neural structure which I'm saying. Basically, they call it a pyramidal cell or pyramidal neural structure. We'll try to understand this. How do I write a model which is emulates the behavior of this, if not exactly, at least asymptotically. So this is what is happening. So as I told you, these are something from dendritic inputs. We get the inputs basically, and there are not one, there are many. So we have here inputs, and this all these things basically comes to a synaptic weight. Basically, these are all synapses. So finally, you see that there is some neuron here, and this synaptic weight means how closely or weakly they are. It means this closely or weakly we are emulating, or I should say, we are modeling using the concept of some sort of weights, what is called as the synaptic weight. And finally, we are combining all the signal. So that's why this add up. Now you may ask, man, how do you know that it is addition is linear? Is basically addition is basically linear operation. But why not something else? So this we'll see later. Don't worry about it. As I told, it's basically approximate modeling of this, not exactly. And then we have there is something called bias concept. So we'll see what do you mean by bias and all. And finally, when this outcome of this particular neuron here. So when it goes through this, it has to go as a particular impulse or some sort of signal. And for that, we use a term, what is called activation potential, or what you call as this particular part VK is activation potential, which activate a function, what is called activation function. And finally, the output is there, whether it is here they use the term something called firing another neuron or not firing. When I say firing, does not mean that we are putting some sort of fire. What I'm trying to say is triggering the neuron to switch on or not. Okay. So this is the output. So this particular thing. So you try to understand this. Input signals. These are what we call as synaptic weights, and all the synaptic weights get summed over here, including the bias. Remember that bias is not weighted; it is direct addition. And what is the use, etc. We'll see. Where how do I get bias idea here? Nothing to do bias in the actual neuron cell, but we have used for some particular reason, which I'll explain in a couple of minutes now. Okay. And the activation function, as I told, basically this mimics the behavior of this axon when the output the axon, what kind of carry signal it carries to another neuron. And same thing is another aspect of it. This how it look like, because many book follow this, but I was talking about this pyramidal cell. So these have dendrite, nucleus, cell body, all the stuff. And there's another way, because some people represent the equivalent mathematical aspect in this way. They make a circle, and instead of summer, they will put entire thing, because effectively whatever I'm doing here, this is what you're doing. You're summing. So it's a weighted sum of the input plus the bias, right? So instead of writing like this, they just do this way. So Wixi plus B, bias is added. This is weighted input. So this is the cell body they represent. And this F is basically just to represent the activation function. Okay. And finally, when the activation function as an input, the argument is the entire whatever this is there. So what is called as the activation potential. And this is the input whatever we are getting. So this is one of the representations. Some books, they follow this kind of notation. But as long as you understand the concept, you don't have to worry about what notation they follow. As long concept is clear and you know the notation they have used. If you understand that, there's nothing to worry. Any questions so far? Hello? Now this same part, which I mentioned here, I'll just try to dissect it a little bit. So said it is composed of set of synapses, or what you call as a connecting links. This basically connecting links. Then we have ADA here. These are the basic constituent blocks of a model of a neuron. And finally, we have activation function to limit the output of a neuron to which is normalized to either 0 or 1, or -1 or 1. You may ask the question, why we are limiting it to 0, 1 or -1 to 1. -1 to 1 is just another notation we are using it. But 0 to 1 is just, as I told, the signal which travels through axon from one neuron to another is some sort of impulse, electrical impulse. So either it is there or it is not there. And it has got certain values. So a maximum is 1 is fixed in case of neural net as an assumption. What is the value in the real human neuron? I don't know. If somebody is interested, they can explore that. But that is not important for us. What we is that what is signal passing, whether it is there, allowing it to pass or not. And also remember that axons are basically, they are just they are basically emulate some sort of a transmission lines. So you know that in your, maybe in the first year you might have read about transmission lines. In your schools also you know that these transmission lines are basically very long and thin. If it is long and thin, can you see something about its resistance? How will be the resistance behavior of that? And it's basically passing the signal. So it can be just like electrical transmission lines. Remember, if you're in school, probably in electrostatistics when we studied in +2 or so, and in physics, so we were taught something R is directly proportional to L by A, where proportionality time, if I proportionality signal if sign if I remove something called rho, that we used to call a resistivity. So when I say R is directly proportional to L by A, means if the length is long and area is less, because when I'm saying this axon is very thin, it's a micron like a structure. So definitely area is very less and length is more. If that is happening, the resistance will be also very high. And because there are so many, so wires will be there parallelly. So whenever two conductors separated by certain distance, you know that there is a capacitance also. So basically it mimics some kind of RC circuits. RC circuit, and accordingly the transmission line equations applies very much over there. So we'll see that. So mathematically, I'll come to this particular point. So first of all, I'm trying to say UK. When I say UK, I'm just taking all the synaptic weights without considering the bias point, without considering bias. So UK, and remember this one thing, if you remember here, something is to be noted. If I'm calling this, if you say that K, you may say, ask, and what is this K and all about? Why is it required? So K is nothing but the kth neuron I'm considering. Currently, I'm just assuming only one neuron, and I've named it as some K. I can name it as Sanjay, you can say name Shivani, anything. So let's say K. So kth neuron I'm talking about. So if you see the notation, is very clearly. So the synapse which connecting the kth neuron to the first input has got a subscript something like this K1, WK1, K2. So K is basically the target neuron you're talking about, and the other index you will be talking is from which particular input you are getting to. Input this particular synapse is getting. So if I say WKJ, it means the kth neuron the synapse is connecting to, and it is getting the input from the jth input source, input signal, and that input source signal maybe these values are coming from the another neuron or maybe from the starting itself. So this WKJ, this notation we have to be very clear. Arbitrary you are not supposed to take. Why I'm saying and emphasizing it? There are many books who follow different notation. So we will stick to this particular notation. So we'll say WKJ, and basically J equal to 1 to M. It means there are M number of inputs may be there, and I'm talking about a kth neuron. Now, if you take into account the bias as well, just wait for a minute. I'll explain this concept of bias. And this phi is my activation function. So activation function takes this as a activation potential. This entire part, UK plus BK, is what is called an activation potential. Means this is a value which is activate that particular function. And this activation function, so accordingly, whatever the activation function we have chosen, what is the characteristic of that? It will accordingly give the value either 0, 1, -1, or +1, depending on what kind of characteristic we have chosen for this. What kind of activation function we are choosing, we'll see. As I mentioned this, the bias has the effect of applying an affine transformation because you are just shifting. When I say affine transformation, mathematics is nothing but basically is a scale and shift. So in a very simple affine transformation, basically it is not scale, you are just applying shift. So that shift is either left side or right side of the initial origin. We'll see that. So VK is entire part is called the induced local field, because that across the neuron that is the induced field. Or simple to say that we call as a activation potential. So in literature, in neural network literature, these two terms are used interchangeably, what is called the local induced field or activation potential. So either is used, as long as you understand what you mean by that, there should not be any problem in your inferences. So when I say this, what is going to happen? This bias or this when you apply. So let's say originally you have not applied bias. Let's say your signal is your decision boundary is passing through this. But if it is less than that, you are shifting down or shifting up. Then it's very abstract. What, man? This shifting down, shifting up. What is this? So I want to clarify this because this problem I had when I started learning this subject. And many books after reading through, they will talk quite abstractly. It will move the boundary, move up, move left, or move down. But how does it happen? Means what is the physical interpretation of that? And how do I know that I have to really apply bias? Right? How do I know this? So this on the based on this my inquiry, I ended up into a blog somewhere, and I tried to got a very simplistic answer and which is satisfactory answer to me. So basically, when you say bias, why should I bother about this bias term? So let's say in a very simple word, let's say you have input and a synaptic weight is there, W0. And the activation function is sigmoid function. Forget about what is happening. Let's say some function is there. We call it the sigmoid. Okay. So this activation function, as per this one, is basically is a synaptic weight. So whatever the input comes, a W0 X and sigmoid, the activation function. You get this. Now, so this is the output if you want to find it out, sigmoid W naught X, whatever it is. So when we change the weight, the steepness of the sigmoid happens. So this I'll show with the diagram, which I have done in this simply program I did in MATLAB. So when I say sigmoid, so initially let's say this particular weight was 0.5x and you're getting this red line. Basically sigmoid is basically S-like structure. So you have something like this. Now if you increase by this weight by let's say another 0.5, so it becomes 1, and then you have something like this green one. So if you see that as I keep on increasing the value of W, my steepness, the steepness of my curve is increasing. It may happen that at some point of time it may become a rectangular function, something like this and this. Possibility is that. But if my requirement is that if I'm looking for that at particular 2 at the input of 2, I should get 0. I should get output 0. Will any of the curve will give me that value? Please answer that. Hello?
No, sir.
No. So any idea? Can you tell me any idea or rough guess? What should I do with this graphs or say this curves so that let's say if I want to say 2 at 2, I should get 0 as the output. What should I do?
So we should add bias to this.
Now probably you get an idea. I'll add this bias. Basically, ultimately, what I'm looking for is to shift somehow. Shift right, isn't it? I want to shift this. When I shift this, so it will happen that. So now you understood the idea when I talk about this here. So when I shift this, so probably at 2, now you get a 0 value. Is okay. Similarly, if I see this, if I want that at -2 or -3, I don't want 0 value. It should be non-zero value. So accordingly, somehow I'll do something so that I'll shift left. Okay, isn't it? Shift left. Accordingly, I'll be getting some other value. So this is what the idea about this bias is. Is this clear to you? First of all, how do I know that I need bias? Second is whether bias is basically inherently used or based on some design component. Okay. So sometime it is given to you explicitly. Otherwise also it is possible to learn just like a synaptic weight you learn. So we'll see that. So I hope the concept of bias is clear to you through this particular diagram and explanation. If any one of you have any doubt, please ask. Okay. So I assume all is well. So this is fine. This is what I told. Now I was talking about this phi as a activation function, and there are various notation we use phi only. So and the first activation function is of type what is called threshold function. So this threshold function is pretty clear. You might have learned in the first year itself something called unit step function. We used to say if the value is greater than or equal to 0, the value will be 1. If it is less than 0, it is 0. If that is the activation function you are talking about, this is the characteristic you use. So definitely, if the value is 1, so it will be 1 means okay, it will be able to fire the another signal, another neuron. And if it is less than 0, then it will not be firing the another neuron. This is the axon thing will do. This is one type of this. Another is something what's called piecewise linear function. When I say piecewise linear function, so here remember that instead of v, I could have taken any other variable of that say. So it says that when value is greater than half, positive half, so value is 1. When it is less than half, minus half, then it is 0. When it is lying between minus half and plus 1, plus half, then it is 1. So you can say that it will be something like this fashion. In between is a linear component. So that diagram I have, I'll show you. So I could have included that, but that time there was something problem. That's why. And then I was talking about the sigmoid function, the S shape, which we talk about this. So S shape is basically something like this. It is defined by explicitly defined by, in mathematics 1 over 1 plus exp minus ab, where a is basically is a slope. This whatever you are getting this function that was slope. Okay. Another is something called signum function. So signum function is basically SGN they call it. When we use a positive value, then it will be 1. When it is equal to 0, means origin. When it is less than 0, it is a negative. So all these things put together, you have something like this. I was talking about the threshold function. It's the value is something like this. Anything above greater than or equal to 0, it will be 1, and anything less than 0 is 0. And when you have piecewise piecewise linear function, so plus half, after that it will be 1, minus half, it will be always 0, and in between there is a ramp. So basically a linear function. Okay. And as I mentioned here, basically a sigmoid function is just like as the a's keep on increasing, basically a slope parameter. So this value keep on changing. The slope keep on increasing if I keep on increasing this weight. And literally I can say that if I want to write, so I can say that limit a tends to infinity 1 over 1 plus exp basically become a square wave. It will come something like this, not square wave, yeah, square wave, it will be coming something like this, or rectangular wave, we can see that. So these are the classical activation function: threshold, piecewise linear, sigmoid function, and signum. Most popularly among them, still it is in use, is sigmoid function. But nowadays we don't use for sigmoid function as well. We don't go for that until unless there is some selective requirement in CNN and all those things. So there is a recent thing which is happening in the deep learning community or the neural nets, what is called rectified linear unit. So how this rectified linear unit is a very simple thing. It's defined as a max 0x. When I say max 0x, so I can say that it is equal to 1 when x is greater than 0, and it is 0 when x is less than 0. Too simple to say that. So you can imagine how the curve will be looking like. It is basically a linear curve from 0 to from 0, of course, 45 degree or whatever you can say that. And before that it is 0, means nothing is there. So why people use it? There is something called this one, what to say, diminishing gradient problem. So this I'll talk about later. But for that timing, you say that there is another function, activation function, something called ReLU, which is nothing but a rectified linear unit. And nowadays there are many versions of it. ReLU, SeLU, many things have come. But these are the basically the basic building block remains ReLU. And I'll tell you that there is something, a new activation function has come, not new, but it came in 2017 by Google Brain Group, and they call it a Swiss function. So basically Swiss function is nothing but the scaled, it's basically weighted version of sigmoid function only. So this I'll talk about sometime later if the time permits later. Then there is something called leaky ReLU. So leaky ReLU is something of this form. Whenever x is greater than 0, then this particular part will become 1. So basically this acts as a, you can say, integrator of basically this identity function it becomes. So this I'll see that. And another is when we can say that what's a big deal in this. So when it is greater than 0 and one is greater than or equal to 0, then this part come into picture. So they call it leaky ReLU. So certain version of them are there. Then there is something called max out. So basically it generalized ReLU and leaky ReLU. So you have this kind of definition. So now the question is, what neuron type should I use? When I say neuron type, what I mean to say that effectively all neurons which we are generalizing remain same, but one neuron is perform better than another is this all depends on the basic characteristic of the activation function you have used. If you use threshold, if you use let's say piecewise linear or sigmoid or signum or this ReLU. So you have to decide on the problem at hand, what kind of characteristic I'm looking for, and accordingly you decide. So some idea about this is like, you say that you use ReLU non-linearity, be careful with your learning rates, and possibly monitor the fraction of dead units in the network, means how many dead units are there. So this I'll talk about. Dead units means those values are 0. And if dead units are matter of concern, try to use leaky ReLU or max out. Okay. And we avoid using sigmoid until unless is really required for that. Instead of that, we use something called 10 hyperbolic. is another activation function, which I'll discuss in case of MLP when I talk multi-level perceptron. But expect it to work worse than ReLU or max out. So effectively, if you have any confusion nowadays, so which one to use, and if you're having so much doubt, blindly go for ReLU. So this is the trend of the day, and it has shown very effective results. Now, there is just a stochastic model of the neuron. So, and I want to tell you that this model which we discuss here, which uses this thresholding function as an activation function, that kind of neural model is called Maclaurin-Spitz model. This I have mentioned here, Maclaurin-Spitz model. In Maclaurin-Spitz model, the neurons make use of thresholding function as an activation function. So this activation function of Maclaurin-Spitz model is given a probabilistic interpretation. When you give probabilistic interpretations, what will happen that so neuron is permitted to reside in only one of two states, either +1 or -1. Of course, just like conventional. But decision for a neuron to fire or to be off is probabilistic in nature. So some sort of probabilistic flavor has been added to it. If X denote the state of neuron and PV the probability of firing, then you have something this. That it will be state will be either on with the probability PV, then you will be off with the probability 1 minus PV. And basically, then you see what is this PV, man? So here it is defined by this 1 over exp minus p by t. So it is tried to please note that it is nothing to do with the sigmoidal function. So basically, and here is a pseudo temperature that is used to control noise level and therefore uncertainty in firing. Well, it's a pseudo temperature. So actually, there is nothing at temperature because this stochastic model has been drawn from this other stochastic theory. So they have taken this particular aspect of it. It controls the thermal fluctuation representing synaptic noise, and that's why they use this. So remember the stochastic model of neuron make use this kind of model. And when t tends to infinity, tends to 0, means your temperature reducing. When stochastic fluctuation is thermal fluctuation is not there, you can say that basically your stochastic neuron reduces to a noiseless and becomes a deterministic. So quickly, I'll with this I'll conclude for today's class. If you see the diagram, we have mentioned one block diagram, writing for the activation block, another one for the summer circuit, and multiple circles for the synaptic weight, then all these lines. That was the structure of one neuron, just one neuron. And now people are designing nets with the millions of neurons. If that kind of thing, how do we study all these things? So to make the studies simple and little tractable as far as comprehension is concerned for a small nets, there's an approach, and we follow this something called as a directed graphs. We use the concept of directed graphs. A very simple idea, nothing to worry as this basically signal flow graphs. The credit goes to Mason. So from this we have learned something called Mason gain formula. Particularly we in ENC we follow this part for the control theory, where very complicated control structures are converted into signal flow graph and study easy. So here the block diagram representation of neural can be further simplified by using signal flow graphs. So the signal flow graphs with well-defined set of rules were developed this method. So what the signal flow graphs basically provide neat method for portrayal of flow of signals in a neural network. Basically, simply to show that without so many circle, block diagram, summer circuit and all, how do I represent the same content in a very simple structure? Sorry. Just a minute. So you have a signal flow graph. Basically, it's a network of directed links that are interconnected at a point called nodes. So those nodes will interpret in some way. So a typical node J has an associated node signal called Xj. So this I'll show you. So before this, let's try to understand. Basically, 3 rules are there, or 4 maximum. So a signal flows along a link only in the direction defined by the arrow in the link. Whichever line you draw, so you mark an arrow and the signal flows in that particular direction only. So there are two types of links. One is called synaptic link, another is called activation link. So I'll show you with this. So synaptic link, if you remember that in the diagram I was saying X and in between circle W was there and this. So that part will be basically we'll be calling as synaptic links. And the part VK2 output was that the block and activation function we marked that we call as the activation link. So another rule is that a node signal equals the algebraic sum of all signals entering a node via incoming links. Let's say there is a node K and to the node K the incoming links are there from ABC. So output will be nothing but sum of ABC. This is what we mean to say. Now rule number 3, signal at a node is transmitted to each outgoing link originating from that node, with transmission being entirely independent of transfer function of the outgoing links. Ultimately, if let's say K is the source node and you're drawing a multiple link out of it, so all will get the same value what was available at node K. We don't apply any current division rule or voltage division rule. It's just a convention, so same value. So here example, whatever I talk about this. So this A is nothing but is basically synaptic links where you have input and the output is there and it is marked by some sort of synaptic weight WKJ. So output will be always WKJ and XJ. This means whatever is there, output will be nothing but multiplied by this value and you have something. Then there is something called activation link. So activation link will be denoted by this a arrow mark and say this phi and dot here. So output will be YK or whatever Y phi and whatever the input argument is there at the input side of this activation link. That will be the argument for this. So remember that how a synaptic link works and how a activation link works. And I was saying that let's say there's a node K and if you're getting value from I and J, so output is nothing but the sum of all those inputs. If I say YI, YJ, so YK is nothing but the sum of the two. And let's say there's a link called XJ and if you're drawing link outside, so nothing but this, the values will remain same. That is XJ and XJ. We don't apply anything XJ by 2, XJ by 2. So don't try to use your idea from the network theory class if you have ever studied that. It's just a notation so that it makes our life easy as far as this is concerned. So just hold it for some minute. I'll complete this. So basically, so each neuron is represented by a set of linear synaptic links, an externally applied bias, and possibly no linear activation function. The bias is represented by a synaptic link connected to an input fixed at +1 because if you remember, I told that synaptic link does not have any weight as such. We directly so to indicate that it's a direct link, you put the synaptic weight to +1 always. And synaptic links of a neuron weights there respect to inputs. Basically, they do this because weight is assigned and weight sum of the input signal defines the induced local field of the neuron in question. And also activation link squashes. When I say squashing, basically this sometimes activation function is also called as squashing function. Basically, they squeeze this and confine to either 0, 1 or -1 to +1. So types of signal flow graphs, basically there are two, but many versions of there are there. The one is complete, means it describes not only the signal flow from the neuron to the neuron, but also signal flow inside the neuron also. And then is something called partially complete. It describes only the signal flow from the neuron to neuron and characterized as follows. So it talks about the source node supply signals to the graph. Each neuron is represented by a single node, what is called computation node. So just we write one dot, or you can say one circle. And there is something called communication links. So it interconnects the source and the computation nodes of the graph and it does not carry any weight, just connection. They merely provide direction of the signal flow in the graph. So this is basically what is called partially complete. Now a partially complete directed graph defined in this particular way is also called an architectural graph. So what will be happen that somehow, suppose I give a configuration, I draw so and so structure, the architectural graph of this structure. So you should understand, you don't have to worry about the suites, etc. All this detailed connection. It should be done in this way. So an example is given here. Let's say this is the classical Macaulay-Spitz model, or I was talking about this, the mathematical model of this. If I represent by using your signal flow graph, so very simple. So you have a dot for denoting this, a simple node for kth, and you draw all these lines. So we are not using any summer circuit, etc. because it's obvious Vk is nothing but sum of linearly weighted sum of this. And remember this bias. So bias is basically when I say wk equal to 0 is basically bk, and so there is no weight. So basically for that to make it source, we fixed always the +1 so that this will be there. It will be taken care of that. All these things. So these all are nothing but your synaptic links, and this becomes your activation link. So instead of a block diagram, you say this one and 5 dots. So it exactly does the same thing in this one, but it's more easy to realize it. Now you'll say, man, there's no difference between this and this. Yes, I do agree. At this moment, it is not. But imagine that there are multiple neurons I'm stacking across here. So may say 10, 20 or 30 neurons you can stack. And if I keep on drawing something like this, it becomes very incomprehensible. Whereas this is very easy. So we'll see in future classes. Whereas when I see architectural graphs, you can see a marked difference between the two. In architectural graph, we don't mark anything about the synaptic wave. We just mention this links, and these are the communication links only. We don't worry about this to indicate whether it's a synaptic link or with the activation link. Just mark it as a node, and this is our computation node, and we just indicate how many inputs are there and how many outputs are. So this is an architectural graph. So I'll stop here only, and we'll resume this class in the resume this discussion in the rest of the class. And I hope you will go through it, and whenever if you have any doubt, don't wait for me to do this. Drop your